Oh, howdy all. Grab yourself a beer. It's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to give some feedback on the December events. Go through the good, the bad, and the ugly as I see them, and also as I've been able to work out from asking a few other people their opinions, people that have different opinions to me, and taking those on board. Additionally, I also wanted to give a couple of ideas for things that could have been done differently, as well as events that could be run in the future. So firstly, I want to just say in praise of polarizing events. The best events aren't necessarily the ones that everyone finds mediocre. They're the ones that are someone's favorite event. And so having a look through the community, Endless Delve was a really good example of a polarizing event. There's a percentage of the player base that really loved it, and a lot of others that were just completely disappointed by it. That's fine. That makes for a good event. Atlas Invasion was also very similar. It was the most popular event in terms of it was the most people's favorite, but it was also one that was regarded as mediocre to bad by quite a lot of players as well. I was certainly in that experience. That was my feelings of Atlas Invasion. I got sort of bored during it and didn't end up even going as far as level 50, but that's fine. It's still a successful event because it was some people's favorite, and that means that it was worth running. So this is why Gauntlet has been such a great event for so long. It's not for everyone. The team that behind it know this, they embrace it, and a new player can look at the Gauntlet and very quickly say, hey, that doesn't look fun at all to me. That's an easy skip. And so I think that that's something that GGG should take on board and say, look, it's perfectly fine to have an event that 60% of the player base think is absolute rubbish, as long as the other 40% think it's great. So my first thought is actually something that is deeper than a problem with any specific event, and that is that the 5 events were similar in some ways. And whilst the events all had their own twist that made them play very differently, each of them was at its core a race from level 1 to level 95 plus. Obviously, most players didn't get to 95 in these events. I know I didn't hit 95 in any of them. But for anyone intending to be competitive, they had to invest a lot of time pushing to 95. So you couldn't win one of these events without spending at least 48 hours playing, probably a lot longer. And additionally, even if you weren't intending to be competitive, it was a long stretch from level 1 to getting to the point that your character feels up and running. So I'll define up and running as being your character has basic gear with all resists capped, you're triple ascended, and you're doing level 68 plus content. Getting to that point of being up and running takes quite a while, and that means that you're spending a lot of your time. If you're playing, say, only 12 hours in the event, then you're probably spending more than half of your time not yet up and running. If you've got 24 hours to play, then yeah, you're going to spend 3/4 of your time when you're up and running. If you've only got 6 hours, you're just simply not going to get up and running at all in some of these events. So I don't think it's a problem that there's some events that are like this, that that you don't really get up and running until 6 hours in. But I do think there should have been some that were different. I think that people that have more time to practice will still be competitive and dominate the leaderboards, even if the events are shorter. But people with less time could still play and still experience like the way that the end game of that event is meant to feel. I'll return to this with 2 concrete event ideas later. One of them being a modification of an existing event to change it to a 6-hour event, and the other one being something completely new. But just keep thinking about ideas for an event that you win or lose by the 2-hour mark, and another event that you win or lose by the 6-hour mark, because you might come up with ideas that are better than mine. The secondary issue with these events was a lack of playtesting. Now, this is specific to Endless Heist and Delirium Everywhere, the 2 most unpopular events. These went live with serious issues. Delirium Everywhere started with 98% Delirious Zone in Act 1. And Endless Heist's initial XP curve was just completely broken, and even by the end of the event, you could not get rogue gear below level 60. Now, no one expects these events to be playtested to the level of a new league, but these events should have been picked up on a first casual playthrough inside the GGG offices, and it's really a mystery as to how they weren't. Delirium Everywhere really should have been capped at 90% until you got to tier 2 maps. Once you're at tier 2 or higher maps, you've got a lot more flexibility in choosing zones to ignore completely, and story bosses should have been given non-random delirium levels. As for Heist, the Endless Heist XP curve should have gone live as it was patched in the middle of the event, and rogue gear should have been available from level 1. So should these events have been voided? This is the next overarching question, and in my opinion the answer is no for these events. although there's going to be some, obviously some events in the future should be voided. Now, I think that voiding should be done if and only if an event would actually break standard open. Doing this is really hard in a 10-day event, especially seeing that Harvest and Ritual went to the all the items that were produced in Harvest and Ritual went into standard, as did all of the raw currency that came out of the Heist League. So with that in mind, it's very, very, very difficult for a temporary event to genuinely break things. It'd be a bit different if things like Eternal Orbs were given out or Mirrors of Calandra were given out in as very super high drop rate items in these events, but that's not the case in any of them. The Endless Delve and Endless Heist starter uniques, though, would need a little bit of care in that situation, and I think they should have just been time limited, with this item cannot be equipped after Christmas Day 2021. That would stop them from having any negative impact in Standard. Yeah, they'd be available for a little bit of time. They'd be a toy you could play around with, but they wouldn't be something that someone motivated by Standard performance would feel, I must play this event to get. And fundamentally, that's the question that should be asked. Would a player that's solely motivated by their progress in Standard feel compelled to play this event? If the answer is yes, the event should be voided. If the answer is no, then leave the event unvoided. And so that's basically means that the only issue was the Endless Delve and Endless Heist starter uniques. And as I say, they could be fixed just by preventing them from being equipped after a certain date. So a quick poll that I ran before we discuss the individual events. I ran this on my YouTube channel asking people what their favourite December event was. Unfortunately, I was capped at 5 answers, so I couldn't say console or skip them all options, which is unfortunate because there tends to be a little bit of a bias towards people picking option 1 in a poll if you can't remove that. And Endless Delve came up as option 1 for everyone. However, I'm pretty confident that these results are clear. Atlas Invasion was a clear number 1, Endless Delve a clear number 2, Gauntlet a clear number 3, and the 2 events that launched broken were down in the poll results. Kind of what I expected. Although I wasn't expecting Atlas Invasion to do quite as well as it did. So Endless Delve came first as popular and polarizing event, and that's fine. The big issue with 2020 Endless Delve was fixed, and that was getting the balance issues with the first node. The first node was completely broken in the 2020 incarnation of Endless Delve. I remember having to level to 4 in order to get through it, and that was on softcore. And that meant that I had to just basically grind mobs at the start, following the crawler, get gear in every item slot, and then finally I was able to do it when I got access to level 4 support gems. If you're in hardcore, it'd be even worse. So yeah, that was ridiculous. There were some ascendancies that could do it a bit better, but generally it was really wrong in 2020. That got fixed, and that first node was nerfed quite a bit. This event was interesting in that it was quite breakable. The Corpse Explosion Ignite build was absolutely ridiculous, but that worked really well for a 10-day event that had no trading. So with no trade economy, the ability to break the event doesn't actually break things. And the fact that it's a 10-day event means that this broken build that will never dominate an event again ends up just sort of being something that's amazingly cool rather than something that becomes stale. So for that reason, I think that the Endless Delve event was a really good one, despite having this broken build. Not having the crafting bench changes the game, but doesn't necessarily make it better or worse. It just makes it different. You just don't get as far as you would if you had the crafting bench. So it means that, you're having as much fun at level 150 in the Delve Mines as you might be at level 220 if you had access to the crafting bench and all the extra power that came from that. You're just using worse gear as a result of not having your resists as easily done. That said, next time that this event is run, I'd like to see the bench be there with recipes unlocked by character level, just to see how the event feels with a different rule set. And so, allow players to to use the crafting bench this time. I also believe that one of Endless Delve and Endless Heist this time should have had the crafting bench and the other one shouldn't have. And this is about creating just divergence between the different events. Make it so that players so the events feel more different from each other rather than more similar. Lastly, and this will be a complaint about Endless Heist as well, the level 40 and 70 transitions were just brutal, and we should have been able to stay 39 or 69 until we were ready to advance. It definitely should not be happening mid-combat. And I know that from playing hardcore in Endless Heist, I had to be very cautious when I was sort of sitting at level 39 about to hit 40, and again when I was at 69 about to hit 70, and doing things like running a purity aura that I wasn't intending to run, just so that I could manage that transition and still be resist capped when I got over the level. Second was Zizran's Krangor Gauntlet, and this is obviously the most polarizing event of all. It's upfront about what you should expect. Gauntlet markets itself as a hyper-competitive event that will disappoint the casual player, and it delivers it fully on both halves of that promise. Gauntlet is also an amazing spectator event, and it's interesting to see that this was the easiest Gauntlet yet in terms of how quickly it was beaten. I feel like Gauntlet would be better with a player skill gems game reduced XP mod in play, because currently it's being won like every time except when there's a really powerful melee build like the slam builds from a few leagues ago. It's almost always won by a build that has gem level scaling rather than by one with weapon scaling. And I feel like having gems feel like they're 2 levels lower all the time because of a reduced XP gain on gems mod. That would actually address that somewhat and make it so that the two types of scaling were closer to each other. Gauntlet's harder rule set also really heightens balance issues, and you can see that when you look at the top 100. You will see exactly 0 Tricksters, Assassins, and Deadeyes. In fact, the top finishing Deadeye was something like position 204. But that top 100 had 24 Seismic Trappers and 21 Val Detonate Dead builds. So I don't think this is a fixable problem, and I don't think it's a real problem from the point of view of the core game. There'll always be a best build, and the fact that, Seismic Trap is much more of an outlier than most, but there'll always be a best build, and there'll also always be builds that are most suited to Gauntlet. And so you will always find that there is this sort of higher requirement to play the best build in Gauntlet. However, GG should definitely look at those outlier skills because they're dominating everything and they are getting stale. Endless Heist comes next. Now, I had high expectations for this. I'm one of those people that like Heist. I know some of you don't, but I do. I like Heist a lot usually. These expectations were not met at all. This was the least popular event, and for good reason. The lack of playtesting really showed here and kind of wrecked the event. The XP fix came too late. This wasn't the event's only issue. Heist difficulty caps out too low for the power level of characters that are possible when you've got access to all the items that Heist can drop. And additionally, Heist rogue gear not being available until level 60 was just crazy. I think that Endless Heist would have been better, much better in fact, as a 6-hour event with players starting already at level 50, with a tailor-made XP curve, one that's been thoroughly playtested, and with players just starting with basic life resist gear and with rogues that have 1 more job speed items. This would not necessarily be 6 hours of play in a row. It's just that when your /played equals 6 hours, your character just becomes unplayable. That's the end of your event. That would be something that I think could be a lot more interesting, just because it's something that's quite different to the normal game. And I also think that Heist... There's 6 hours of great gameplay in Endless Heist. There's not 24. And the event went too long because of that. So that's some of the thoughts I had on Endless Heist. But fundamentally, this just needed more playtesting. And it's entirely possible that Endless Heist could be a good event in the future, even with the same 10-day setup that it had this time, if the playtesting is done. But if it's not done, then there's no point running it again. Alice Invasion is next, and this event wasn't for me, but it was definitely a good event. Lots of players loved it, and that's what matters. It won my poll of which was your favourite event, and it won it decisively. Now, I actually got bored in Act 4 because doing the campaign with access to all the top leveling items in the game is just not my idea of fun, but to many people it is. There's this sort of dominating their way, crushing your way through the acts at blitzing speed with access to incredible gear is something that a lot of players like. Now, this event proved especially popular with players who had never encountered some of the endgame bosses before. I think that this is where it really shone. Getting to fight like Chayula or Shaper or Synthete Nightmare in Act 3 let people experience toned down and readily beatable versions of these fights. This event should run again unchanged, even though I'll sit it out when it does. In fact, I would not be opposed to GGG running it as soon as the Delirium Everywhere event is over. Just run another copy of this event. People will like it. People that missed it last time will play it. And people will just generally have fun. It'll be something to do during the extension of 3.16. Delirium Everywhere comes next, and All I can really say is one word here: oops. Seriously, oops. Why was this not playtested? Why are there early storyline zones that have been given ridiculously high delirium percentages that don't change over time? You know, you have a labyrinth trial in a 98% delirious zone. 98% delirium means that monsters have something like 15 times their normal hit points. This means that a trash monster has hit points comparable to Merveil. This is just completely and utterly ridiculous. And the best strategy for this is to find low delirium percentage zones to grind for XP and items. Then when you're forced to, blitz through the high delirium percentage zones just doing objectives. Did playtesters find this optimal strategy fun at all? Why doesn't the loot scale with the delirium level? There's a bunch of other things as well, like the event is brutal on Conqueror RNG too. You know, you can wind up with Veritania spawning in a 99% delirious map because you get unlucky and it goes on the wrong tile set. That can be brutal, but really the problems are early game. I think the core idea here is great, but this should have had the Tempest League tech of zones re-rolling their delirium percentage hourly, so that if a player does get into a situation where, say, Depraved Trinity is 78% delirious and they just can't beat it, then they can wait till the next hour and maybe then Depraved Trinity will be 22% delirious and they can beat it. There should be a cap at 90% delirium on zones with mandatory objectives, which is basically everything up to tier 1 maps. So once you've done tier 1 maps, you then have a lot more flexibility in branching out as to what maps you do. But up to tier 1, you can have a lot of problems there. So it should be 90% delirium cap until then, and there should be some sort of loot scaling. And really, this is the sort of thing that all should have been picked up during playtesting. Not just a week of playtesting. This should have been picked up in a 6-hour playtest of this event, maybe even 4. So this makes me think of the idea that I had for a short event. So I mentioned earlier wanting to have shorter events that you can start on your own schedule, 2 to 6 hour events that you play and then are done with. And you can start at any time over the period that the event's live. And it made me think of the only in-game map with a time limit, and that's Ober's Cursed Trove. For those of you that aren't familiar, Ober's Cursed Trove is 6 rooms full of monsters that you've got to clear out, and you have a 9-minute time limit. This 9-minute time limit is strictly enforced. If you are still in the zone when it ticks over from 8:59 to 9 minutes, your character dies instantly. You do get a warning before that's going to happen, so it's not like it's a haha surprise, you overstayed your welcome. Then once you do all of those 6 zones, you then get to move into a new room, which is just got a bunch of chests in it. So an idea was born from thinking of this map, and that was Ober's Infinite Curse. Here you would start at level 50 and you could pick a 5-link chest of your choice of item base, plus a 4-link helm, gloves and boots, and then you're given a few essences to establish a basic gear set and access to all of the skill gems in the game. Maybe instead you'd just be given predefined rare items to pick from. Maybe instead you would start with a set of pre-rolled rares that are just life, resist and local defenses on the same base type as your class is chosen. So for instance, if you chose to be a marauder, then maybe you just get pure armor, life resist and local defenses bases. Whatever it is, just start off with a bunch of predefined rares or essences to craft your own. And then you're thrown into a level 45 Ober's Cursed Trove. You can only attempt this once, and on winning, you're then awarded a level 50 version of the map. Beat that, you get a level 55 one. Beat that, you get a 60. Beat that, you get a 65, 70, 75, 80, etc, etc. Possibly there'd be XP multipliers needed and special chests at the end of each map that are determined through playtesting, just so that you can get some increased access to powerful gear as you're going along, and also so that you can scale up your character level in line with the amount that of increased demands that the game is making on you. Eventually you'll hit a point where you can't beat the map before either the timer or the monsters kill you. And that just ends your attempt on that character. It's up to you whether you then decide you want to try again, or whether you're done with the event and you just walk. If you had fun, then you play again. If you weren't having fun, or if you've just got other things on in your life, then you just give them a miss. Win, lose, or draw, it's likely you'd only be playing an hour or 2 each attempt. I think that's something that would be really different to all of the events that will run during December, and would be something that would have been great to sandwich in between 2 of the other events in there. Now, it has one major issue, being its overly punishing of disconnects, and I'm not sure if I can see a way to fix that. but I also don't think perfection is needed in events that are relatively short. You know, disconnecting and losing an hour of gameplay is unfortunate, but it's not catastrophic like disconnecting and losing your, disconnecting and, say, a serious fight can be just as bad, and that happens in the normal game. Anyway, that's all I got on these events. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and I will see you next time.